Right. Good afternoon from Tampa Bay, Florida, Divesoft USA's HQ. So happy to have everybody join us. Overnight, my hair fell out, so I had to cut it. Glad to see everyone's joining us from all over the world. So for today's episode, we've got a good show for you guys today. Today we're going to be talking about the Sidemount Liberty Rebreather, the same Liberty Rebreather that we have, but in the Sidemount configuration. Yeah, I got a haircut. I'm sorry for everybody. No, I had to get rid of the hobo look, so I had to get all trimmed up and cleaned up. So maybe shave my beard next time. So, but I am glad to see everybody joining us. So hope everyone remember to like, share, and I would say subscribe, but make sure you're following us on the Divesoft Facebook page, and be sure to host a watch party so we can get lots of people to watch this episode. And just so everyone knows that we're also posting these videos onto our YouTube page. So if you want some more information, go check out our YouTube page, and we keep these videos on our Facebook page as well. So looks like we have a bunch. I know you guys have already counted most of the ducks. I try to hide them, but don't do too much of a good job of hiding them. But so today we have our Sidemount Liberty. I also have it broken down as well. So I'm going to go through the whole building process so we can really dive in and get a really good in-depth look at the Sidemount Liberty Rebreather. Kind of the first thing I want to talk about is kind of like, side mount diving is a tool, and it's a different configuration other than back mount. But there's a lot of skills that kind of translate from both sides. It's a very good streamlined configuration. Instead of getting cylinders off your back, you have them under your arm. If you're not familiar with side mount diving, it's very equipment intensive in terms of you need to have all the equipment configured to you kind of on an individual level. And so what Divesoft has done has taken the Liberty Rebreather. We have the same head here with all the electronics. It's essentially the same breathing loop, but it's with this platform is configured to be in the side mount configuration. It's a very particular tool for a particular configuration and for a job. It changes your profile so you're much more narrow, and so which is very popular for cave diving when you're diving in between restrictions and bedding planes. But it's also popular amongst divers that just want to get the cylinders off their back and under their arms. It's very good for travel. It makes for kind of a lighter system of traveling. You can rent single cylinders anywhere. And so with side mount diving, you can just rent two individual cylinders, and you don't have to band them together for doubles. You can just configure them in side mount, and now you have two cylinders everywhere you go. But our side mount system, we wanted to make it pretty simple, as simple as rebreathers can go, right? But the way that you attach this to yourself, you have two bolt snaps, and then you just have your mouthpiece. And then typically a side mount diver will have a bungee system. And what you can do is you can wrap the bungee around the outside of the cylinders, and that will keep it close to your body so it'll be nice and clean. So our side mount system, the way that I have it here with this short can. Let's see if I can kind of, you can kind of see it here. It's shorter in length, but it's still the same scrubber size as the regular standard scrubber that we have. You can see, make sure that you guys can see kind of the bottom here. It's a bottom plate. Rather on the standard scrubber, it has kind of a fitting for the water trap here. The water trap that we use at the bottom of this plenum is just as kind of a sponge. Sponges, and I like to use the brand ShamWow. So those things are fantastic for absorbing water, and it makes a very good water trap for the rebreather. But this is the short can. It has better buoyancy characteristics than the regular can. it sits a little bit more neutral. It doesn't float as much, kind of in the butt up orientation. But the system underwater, it's neutrally buoyant. And I'll kind of dive into the individual pieces there. But we have the titanium frame. So this is the frame of the system. It kind of gives it the backbone. I like to call it a skid because it looks like a skid. But it's made of titanium. It also, here in the bottom, is we have the onboard cylinders. This side mount rebreather system has both of the cylinders on board. The diluent and the oxygen are on board in the system, so you don't need to offboard any gases. A lot of divers, a lot of rebreather divers like to offboard additional gases just so they have additional gas supplies. So the head and the electronics are located kind of in the middle of the system. And then you have kind of a short breathing loop here in the middle. And then you have the counterlungs located on the top part of the rebreather. The counterlungs sit between the diver and the system, a little bit sandwiched in between, but it's not compressed. And then now we have the loop. You can see that it's pretty long when it's kind of extended with the breathing loop, but the way that it's worn on the diver, this will tuck underneath the arms, and this goes to the diver's mouthpiece, or it goes to the diver's mouth. So kind of the main length of the system is pretty flush. It's about the length of an aluminum 80 cubic foot cylinder. So here on the breathing loop, we have a T-piece ADV here, and I'll show you kind of on my close-up camera. I'll show you these individual pieces later. But we have your T-piece ADV, which is located on the inhale side of the side mount rebreather. So you have the T-piece ADV, goes up to the mouthpiece. Make sure, there you go. So you can maybe see it a little bit better. I hope it's in 4K that we're showing this off to you guys. But you have your diluent side. You have their manual add valves located right here on the mouthpiece. You can adjust the clocking of these mouthpieces so that they don't stick out too far, or that they're more inboard, or wherever is more comfortable to you. It's a pretty simple adjustment. Then you have the diver's mouthpiece. Up on top, we have the heads-up display. Now, the heads-up display, for side mount, you want to have an elongated cable that it's a little bit longer than normal. Now, the Liberty side mount is designed kind of out of the box, typically to be worn on the diver's right side. Now, there are other divers that they wear it on the left side, but there's, generally it's worn on the right side. Now it's just kind of, it's a preference for the reason of wearing it on the right side. I know for me, I prefer it on my right side. And I'll show you guys the overpressure valve with the counterlung is located on the right side, and it makes it easy to dump with it on the outboard side. So we have the manual add valves. We have the DSV here located on the top. It's a pretty simple, just a simple barrel, simple DSV. You can see where we keep it very low profile. Then we have our heads-up display with the elongated cable. I'm not really sure specifically how much longer our side mount heads-up display cable is to the regular cable, but it's a little bit longer. And then we have our oxygen manual add valve that goes down the loop into the counterlungs. Now, let's go down to this side. So if the diver is wearing the side mount unit on the right side, the unit is this is the side that faces outside from the diver. The overpressure valve is located on the right side. We can see it's the same kind of OPV that we had for our back mount counterlungs. It's this simple piece. So Very easy if you're doing a diluent flush or if you need to relieve pressure. Very easy to do. You can reach out and do it. So that's kind of the general breathing loop, and the way that I'll go through it. I'll go through all the individual pieces as I build the unit and put it together. I'll be sure to go ahead and submit questions, and then Matt will throw them up so I can see them. Let me make a little bit of space so that we have plenty of room to operate. All right. 4 ducts here. So here we have our scrubber. You can see here that this is the short can. I'll show you guys the scrubber differences. There we go. So I haven't really done a video explaining all the different scrubber sizes that we have, but this is the 5.5 pound scrubber. And we'll see if we can kind of blow it up on the close-up screen. There we go. So this is the 5.5 pound scrubber. It is a radial scrubber. And then because there's no sorb inside of it, this cap is kind of free-floating. And then here at the bottom of the can, we have our water trap. So the first thing that I always do when we're building the Liberty is we follow our checklist steps. We calibrate our oxygen sensors. We make sure that our head is ready to go. And then we're going to fit the head to the scrubber. There you go. So I put this yellow tape on here to let me know that it's a side mount heads-up display cable, that it's a little bit longer. And then here's a good thing that I can show you guys. We still have our 2 computers inside the head of the Liberty Rebreather. But you can see here, I removed one handset cable, and I put a plug on the right side of the cable. So the reason why I put this plug on this cable is so that I only have one handset. Now this handset is still going to be able to read and control both computers. But this heads-up display is reading directly to this side of the electronics, and then I have this my handset cable, and I have my buddy display. So if I wanted to be extra redundant, I could have 2 handset cables, just like I have in back mount. But because I put this cap on here, I only have 1 handset cable right here. So this is the right handset, buddy display, heads-up display, and then this is a plug, but this is where I would have my left handset. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to do, because I'll be going back and forth between both cameras, these are kind of the small breathing loop tubes. So they're labeled. So counterlung left, head center, head rim, and counterlung right. So these are bayonet connections. So once they slide in, then they rotate. All right. So then we'll go to our main camera. And there. Let's see see if Matt can blow up our main camera, and I can show you guys. There we go. So here we have the head in the scrubber, and then we have the skid here. Make sure I don't bump anything. It gets kind of crowded with all the gear on this table. So the two regulators that I have on this skid is the Apex flight regulators. The reason why we use the Apex flight regulators is, A, we love Apex. They're great regulators, have a very good reputation, easy to service, and these guys are little workhorses. And the Apex regulators are very, very lightweight, good regs for traveling. So we decided to combine them with our side mount system. You can see that we have two long low pressure hoses, and then we have two other smaller low pressure hoses that go to different feeds. We labeled the oxygen with green hoses. Now for pressure gauges, a lot of folks use there's kind of a different philosophy on what to do with the side mount pressure gauges. I use button gauges because I can still view them, but I'm not going to be watching them as closely as I would in open circuit. I kind of just take a glance at them every 30, 45 minutes, only because I don't go through that much gas during a CCR dive. Other divers like to use transmitters, or they like to have submersible pressure gauges that are kind of held up against the breathing loop. So now, since I'm a good diver and I keep everything capped up, I'm going to remove some of the caps to make it easier. Now, on this back plate, on the skid, what's very important are these pins that are located on the back plate. Let's see if we can go to the other camera so you guys can see a closer look. There we go. Actually, I should probably use this. So you guys can see I have two pins located here on the sides, right here. These are the important pins. These are the locking pins that are used to hold the head and the plenum together so that they're not going to separate. So what I need to do is that when I'm installing the unit, I need to make sure that the pins are lined up. I'm going to remove this cap for this. So that's for the oxygen banjo. So I'm going to generally make sure that it's kind of somewhere near each other. There we go. If you can see, I'm making sure that it's flush. And this is where the pins go. You have this lower bracket here, and this upper bracket right here in the middle. I'm sorry, in the top. So I make sure those are lined up. And then I make sure that I'm able to access my oxygen feed on the other side as I secure that. So once everything's kind of lined up, I'm going to commit, and I'm going to go ahead and start tightening down the unit. Now, when I do my pre-dive checks, I'm going to do a positive and negative test. Now, the negative test is very, very important because during that negative test, I'm going to be able to see if there's any leaks in the system. Now I can see that the unit is flush. Make sure that guy moves out of the way. Make sure the unit is flush. I'm going to check the locking pins, make sure that it's set. And then I'm going to go ahead, and here we have our oxygen feed for our solenoid. So this guy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure that it's oriented the right way, and then it's going to screw in. Now this Thursday on the Dive Talks episode, I have Ed Sorensen joining us. A lot. Now the reason why I mentioned Ed is we were talking about this last weekend. I was over at his shop and we were talking about how exposed this solenoid is, this banjo, how many hits that it takes. We're going to show you guys a video of Ed just kind of crawling around, testing the unit and kind of beating it up. And you can see that what's going to get kind of rubbed on and scraped on first is going to be this portion of the skid. And it actually protects the banjo pretty well. We dive in this unit pretty often, and there's no marks, there's no scuffs. There's a lot more mud and dirt stuck on the other part of the unit, but it's in pretty good condition. And this unit's probably about at least a year old. So, all right. So I have to constantly be paying attention, making sure that I'm not pinching any cables. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add my cylinders. Now, the onboard cylinders are two 2-liter bottles. The valves that we use are these Nowtech valves. I'm a big fan of these valves. They're very robust, very tough, and the knob is even a little bit offset, and so it just feels really good. They're very good valves. So I always make sure that my cables are out of the way. And then remove dust caps. Now I want to make sure that I'm lining everything up the right way. So when everything's secured, the hoses should be able to move freely kind of through. You can see that the way that they're routed, make sure it gets a good shot. The way that they're routed, it loops down on the bottom of the skid and then it goes around and up the top. So I have 3 cables that I want to make sure that I don't pinch. As much as I love the MyFlex hoses, they're a little bit easier to pinch and shut off than other hoses, than just traditional rubber hoses. Now I have my diluent. Now you can see that the diluent cylinder sits below there you go. It sits below the oxygen. So sometimes it can be, make sure you guys can see. Make sure that I'm able to do it the right way. All right. So the clocking of these bottles, make sure I don't knock over my camera. You can see how they're stacked on each other and that the diluent sits beneath the oxygen. Now I have my hoses. Everything is accessible. Now I can go ahead and start tightening down. Make sure I stay on the good camera view. Just hand tight is okay on that hose that Rebecca is asking. Yes, 2-finger tight, right? So I don't want to crank down on anything. So now I have the system right here. So I'm going to check and make sure that all my cables are easily accessible, that nothing's twisted or fouled up, because when I attach the loop, all that length is going to matter. And it looks like I may have pinched something. So. All right. So I have my handset cable and I have my heads-up display cable. I want to make sure that they're laying down nice and neatly. I could use the Velcro on top to hold it down. I hope that it's not too loud on the microphone. But this does a good job of kind of keeping everything in place and making sure that it's not stretched out or gets caught on anything. The next piece that I'm going to have here is I'm going to have the counterlungs. So let's see if we can jump over to the big camera and I can show you guys. Squeeze it up. So here we have our counterlungs. Now the way that we attach these is that our first generation of these were attached via these Velcro straps. They would go through the eyes here on the skid. Then we designed these very fancy just clips that are on the side. Let's see if you can see on this little screen right here. It's these little side clips. They're a pain in the butt to get them installed, but once you're installed, you don't have to remove them, and they attach directly to the skid. Keeping Matt busy going back and forth between the cameras, right? So I'm going to attach the left side counterlung first. I'm sorry, the left side hose first. It's that bayonet. If you look on here, you'll see dots. Now, there we go. You're going to have a good click. And then I'm going to rotate. Rotate all the way around. And then I'm going to do the right side. There you go. And then I'm going to rotate it out. So make sure that the buttons are not lined up and then there's no potential for any type of disconnection of the counterlungs to the hoses, to these breathing loop hoses. All right, now we have audio again. Sorry about that, guys. So we have our audio tied to the close-up camera. So whenever the close-up camera is not in the source, we lose the audio. All right, so here we have our breathing loop. Something that I want to talk about regarding the breathing loop is the way that we have our our DSV kind of connected. It's the same way that we have our bailout valves connected as well. And, you know, part of your important checks is to check your mushroom valves. We have several different generations that we've kind of experimented with these rings. Rather than using a bayonet system or a locking system here at the mouthpiece, we've experimented with these rings. And what I have here, I have the first generation of rings. You can see that it's really just kind of, it might be too far. So we have, this was the first generation of rings. And now we have the second generation of rings. So you can see that these rings are designed to have this piece that you can easily kind of get your fingers in and remove them, versus on this guy, you know, you almost have to use a tool every time to get your fingers in there to remove them. And then we have the most recent generation of rings. So these types of rings, they're designed that you can get a tool in there and it can remove them and open them up rather than being exposed. Like here, you see that it's a hook. You know, people can find a good way to get that entangled, but these were designed to not create any openings, but you can still grab them and remove them and open them up. Here on our diving surface valve, I actually have a combination of the two. So as managing our kind of fleet here in-house, I keep this ring is kind of the easiest to open and close, so that you can verify your mushroom valves and check them and kind of keep a regular eye on them. But so on this elbow here, I have the first generation of rings, and this is designed to make it as very clean as possible. So because it's not very often that I open these up, the only reason why I would need to remove this is in order to remove the manual add valve. But you can see, imagine if I had to open that up every time I needed to go diving to verify my manual add valve, my mushroom valve, I would need a tool to do that. So that's why we kind of evolved. This is the second generation, and then this is the third generation. But I always have them stowed away so that they're kind of up against the body and they're not out and exposed and can get caught on anything. Especially in side mount diving, there's more than a couple opportunities to kind of shove your face in the mud if you're trying to get through a restriction. But you can see here, and I'll dive more into detail with this when we do the mouthpiece Geartalks. But I can show you guys how you open and close it, and then so right there, I'm able to verify my mushroom valves. Now, these teeth are somewhat fragile. People are really good at trying to twist it and trying to handle it and break it. And so that happens when folks can break the teeth. So you do need to take extra care, just like you would taking good care of your rebreather, like a good technical diver. When you remove it, just be gentle and just kind of place a little bit of weight, and then you can remove it. You can see that the mushroom valve actually jumped to the other side. I'll dive more into detail later, but this is kind of just a separate carriage piece that can go back and forth between the two. Right? Voila. So we have our DSV and then our manual add valves. I'm going to remove these caps. So Rebecca is asking if we do the check test with the mushroom valves, or we place it up against our cheeks. Yes, that's a great way to do the kind of what they call that, the microphone check on your checking your mushroom valves. Place it up against your cheeks, and you can test them that way. So we'll go up to the big screen now, to the big camera. All right, there we go. So that now I'm going to connect. First thing I'm going to connect is our ADV. I'm going to remove the cap for the gas feed. Now I'm going to line up the dots. Have that line down. I'm going to line up the dots, and then I'm going to rotate. And it's going to sit flat. Actually, let's go to, and then I'm going to do the right side. I'm going to line up the dots, and I'm going to make sure that the hose feed, there we go, line up the dots to the bayonet lock, and then there we go. So you can see that the loop is straight and it goes straight out. The next thing, let's go to our close-up camera. So we installed these. Now, what's a good trick, what I always like to do is I use bungees or hair ties. Hair ties are pretty easy around the loop hoses. So it just kind of keeps everything nice and clean. Now, you don't want to make them very tight, and then I keep kind of one big loop hose, and that'll keep everything in. You'll see why in a moment. So next thing I want to do is I want to connect my ADV. So I'm going to remove the cap here. There we go. You can see that this is quite the build. But if you're following your checklist, that step-by-step process will get everything right through the right way. Now I'm going to get my oxygen hose on the right side, and I've got my diluent hose. Now, what I want to do, because I want to protect them as much as possible, I'm going to feed them through I'm going to feed my oxygen hose as well. Now, I like to run my hoses on the inboard side of the breathing loop and have them run to the outside. Next, I have my heads-up display cable, and I'm going to run that next to, right adjacent to my oxygen feed. Let me reset. Got caps running around everywhere. There you go. So we can get it, make sure everybody can see pretty well. So I still have one more hose here. And then I'm going to remove this. There you go. And then I'm going to install my O2 feed. Now there's an O-ring right here. Why is this O-ring here? So this O-ring is designed so that if you crank down on it, which you shouldn't do, you should only use your fingers for these hoses. So if you that's in order to create a gap so that you're not cranking up against the screw. You want to make sure that it's just 2-finger tight. Now I'm going to remove this cap. Hope everybody's been counting all the caps. And then I'm going to feed this guy right here. And then I'm going to connect my diluent to my manual add valve. And I have my heads-up display. And then that guy is going to go right up against it. Now, you can see how there's tension in here. You see how it looks very, very tight. That's probably because something is getting a little bit pinched kind of back on the side. But for this video, it's okay. But just so you guys know, if you see any cables and you see them straight like this, they're obviously under tension. And this is, we want to protect our rebreathers, we want to protect our cables, and we want to make sure that there's no tension under any of these cables. So now we have our Now this is our mouthpiece with our manual add valves, oxygen and diluent. You can see here, let's see, hopefully it's not too, so that's our lever for our manual add valve. It's going to feed directly here. Now remember, our diluent is added just right before it goes to the mouthpiece on the inhale side. So if you're adding this gas and you're inhaling, it's going to go directly into your mouth. Now the oxygen feed is on the downstream side of our mushroom valve. So that's how we add our gas. Now my breathing loop is open, so now we have our loop closed. So when it's in the down position, it's closed, versus open in the up, closed in the down. So our diluent is louder than our oxygen. The reason for that is because on our oxygen side, we have a flow restrictor embedded in the manual add valve. And that's designed so that you're able to appropriately throttle how much oxygen you're feeding into the system. Now remember, it's just downstream of the mouthpiece. So if we're breathing on the rebreather and I add oxygen, am I going to see an immediate impact on my oxygen sensors? No, it's not. The oxygen has to travel down the loop through the counterlungs and into the head and into the oxygen sensors. Oh, I need to hide the caps because you guys are counting now. I think some may have fallen too. Uh-oh. So on our side mount system, and then we have our handset. What I like to do is I like to stow the handset right in that big loop that I have it nice and stowed. So now if I'm traveling or if I'm going to and from the water, it's nice and smooth and tight, and it's easy to travel with. I have my handy dandy handle on the back, and typically we have a handle here on the front too. I just removed it. So a couple little other interesting features. So besides this being a complete side mount system with our cylinders, both of our cylinders on board, there's been no changes on the head or the breathing loop itself, really, because you still have your 4 oxygen sensors. You can see that they're kind of located on the top side of the rebreather. And so, and then we have our 2 batteries, our 2 depth sensors, and our 2 helium sensors. So because if in the event of a flood, you have the mouthpiece, and you can see that's quite problematic with the side mount rebreather, is that if you have a flood in the system, where's it going to go? There's no T-pieces blocking the water. So it's a straight shot right to the head. But at least with the orientation of our oxygen sensors being on the top part, the water it's kind of at the highest point of the system and able to kind of get out of the water as much as possible. But we do have our water trap embedded on the exhale side of the counterlung, just like we talked about last week. It's our dive soft snorkel, but it's a rubber hosing just like this, a corrugated hose that works like a snorkel in preventing water from getting into the system. It's our side mount rebreather water trap. All right, I think that's about everything. So no dork. So let's see if you guys have any other questions. We can answer them, or if not, then that's about everything with the side mount rebreather. I wouldn't say it's a simple system or a complicated system. It's a straightforward system. Everything I had here on the table on this side was part of the conversion kit. Like this is our shortened canister, but it's still the same head and electronics. Let's see if there are any other questions. Let's see, Dominic Hi, Dominic. Can you explain a scenario? Looks like but so typically that's pretty much everything on here on the system. So I can show you guys what. Then we have everything set up. I think what I can do is I can show you guys also the bailout system. So our side mounts, our electronics, we have a feature on the rebreather that you can tell the rebreather that it is being used as a bailout rebreather. And with the side mount rebreather, that's a very handy a good setting to use if you're using dual rebreathers. So you can essentially have this system set up like you would a stage bottle or a bailout bottle, and as you're telling the system that it's in a bailout rebreather mode, it will be on standby and it will track your decompression obligations, and it'll monitor the breathing loop. It'll make sure that the system has a breathable loop, a breathable PO2 in the loop. And if we can jump on the close-up camera, I can show you guys. Make sure that. Okay, so right now I have it in the standby, the home menu, and what I can do is I'll kick it into the dive mode. There we go. Sorry about the glare, guys. So the dive mode, and then here I have dive mode starts. I have dive mode CCR, bailout standby CCR, or manual CCR or bailout mode open circuit. So I click bailout standby. It's telling me to calibrate my sensors, which if I was going diving in my checklist, that's kind of the first thing I do. Then I go through my checklist. Now, this is the checklist that we see observed before every type of diving. It's basically our pre-jump checklist. Dill valve open, diluent pressure okay. Is our ADV functioning? Inflator functioning? Diluent manual add valve okay. Overpressure okay. Diluent air. So do I have my diluent mix set to air? Oxygen valve open. Oxygen pressure okay. Oxygen manual add valve okay. So with all these prompts, we're going through and we're verifying. I'm putting hands on the valve. I'm putting hands on the SPG. I'm putting hands on the manual add valve. Bailout pressure okay. Bailout regulator okay. Bailout nitrox 28 okay. I have that preset for my bailout mix. Argon valve okay. Dry suit inflation weights. Overpressure valve. Heads up display okay. Buddy display. Torch okay. So Rebecca's asking a good question about in bailout, the scrubber is cold when you jump on. So kind of just like as a side mount system, you're kind of going back and forth between mouthpieces, between cylinders. You breathe for 10 minutes, then you jump to the other, and you breathe for 10 minutes. And Ed and I will talk about this on Thursday, but typically you want to go every about 10, 15 minutes. You want to go on the side mount rebreather, and you want to basically wake it up in terms of activating the scrubber and breathe through the system. This step 5 in the checklist, we have our set points, descent, set point, high, low, what's my stack time, and my battery time. You can see my stack time, it's 4 hours. I need to reset my stack timer. So be careful, check reactions to PO2, check your CO2 regularly, go to bailout if not sure. So now we have our pre-breathe screen. I have it set here for 3 minutes of a pre-breathe. And I do that because I'll sit on this screen for 3 minutes and breathe. And then I'll sit for another 2 more minutes in the next screen and just breathe on the unit, just to verify everything's working, everything's functional, that I'm not having any problems. So it's asking me if I click to reset the timer. So you can see that there is an option to skip the pre-breathe if you choose to, just like I am here in this demo mode. So you can see in big red letters it's telling me bailout CCR. Kind of that home screen, what it's showing me. There we go. I'm seeing each of my 4 oxygen sensors, what's the millivolts that they're reading, and what's the PPO2 that's corresponding to. My top right of the screen, I have my total time to surface. My bottom right in yellow, I have the loop PO2. And then on the right side, I have my set point. So I have it set for my descent set point. So as I'm descending, the rebreather is going to try to maintain a loop PO2 of 0.41. Then we have our depth, and then we have our total dive time. So these are what's going on to these are kind of the home screen of what you're seeing when the unit is in a bailout rebreather mode. So something that I know we haven't shown a lot of, and if you're curious, this is just kind of how it looks. If I need to jump on it, double click, then I have dive mode. Now I'm in my diving mode. The unit knows that, like, okay, I jumped on it and I'm diving. You can see that it was 2 switches, so it's very easy to do. Now the rebreather is injecting oxygen into the loop. If you can hear it, it's trying to boost up that PO2. You can see right now it's at 0.27. It's trying to get up to 0.4. Cool. And I'm going to end the dive. All right. Well, I hope that was informative for all of you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of walkthrough on our Sidemount rebreather. If you guys have any questions, always be sure you can write on our Facebook page. You can always comment on these videos and ask questions. And I know myself or Matt will try to get in and answer each of your questions specifically. So be sure to join us this Thursday on my Dive Talks episode. Ed Sorensen is going to be joining us there. He's a very accomplished side mount diver. He also dives back mount too, but predominantly in side mount. Be sure to tune in on Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a very good episode. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.